There's that right thing.
Two things.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. It's May 21st. We're holding our curriculum committee meeting, which is also being live streamed on MSAD11.org. It is 3:32. And is everyone here on the curriculum committee? Are you on? Yes, you are.
Yep.
And yeah, so I'll introduce each of us. Please start.
Linda Caputo. All right.
Diane Potter.
Alyssa Tracy.
Megan Carlson.
Thank you. And we have one excused absence, as we know. And then Miss Angela, take it away.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so our first agenda item is our annual review of our ESEA, Elementary Secondary Education Act, title dollars. So I created a document like I do every year. It's going to be posted on the website after this meeting for anyone to view it, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. So this is considered the launch of our public notice of how we intend to use funds. We'll discuss it here. I'll make any edits if necessary here with this group. Then we will post and share it with the public through this venue, as well as through some email communications to families and staff. And then the public comment period will close on the morning of June 4th, so that changes can be made if necessary, and then there can be a review by the school board on the 4th, so then I can move forward with creating the application. That's sort of the process. So we have used our funds pretty consistently the same way year over year. So I'm going to just go through the outline. So, and this is on your second page of your packet. So if you wanted to follow along there, that's helpful probably. I realize the font's a little small. Sorry about that. So for Title 1A, that is title money that's afforded a school that has 40% or greater free and reduced lunch. And then there's a calculation based on your district count, your school count, and how that compares to your free and reduced lunch rate that affords us dollars. So we have 3 schools who qualify in our district, Pittston Randolph, Laura E. Richards, and Riverview. The middle school may qualify, but we don't access funds for that building because we've decided you have to have a theory of action, and our theory is if we intervene early, then it won't be as significant a need in the secondary levels. Helen Thompson does not qualify because their free and reduced lunch rate for multiple years has been below 40%. So at one point they did, but they don't anymore. You get a grandfather period and then you get exited. So they've been exited, but they are required to have the same service model that we have in our Title I schools. So it's called comparable services. And there's a report done annually to make sure what we're providing in our Title I schools is also provided in our non-Title I schools of the same grade spans. So that's where our local dollars, or Title V, I'll show you, is used to ensure that we have a similar model for intervention services. So Title I really is focused on access to learning for students who are homeless. Although in our district, our homeless liaison is our director of special services, McKinney Bento liaison. And we have other funds and local funds that contribute to supporting our homeless population. Mostly that's with transportation to make sure, like, as they're moving from place to place, they have access to get to school every day. But it's sort of private and it's confidential, but there's a report that's generated for that every year too. But Title I is required to have a portion reserved for that. So honestly, we reserve like $100 every year, and we focus on if a student who is considered homeless wants to take the SAT or an AP exam, because it's usually in our secondary levels or something like that, that we'll pay for that out of this fund. But because we've been able to access other funds, we haven't really had a need to draw down Title I for that reason. And then it has to focus on supplemental intervention, or it's called supplemental instruction and intervention. It's instruction through intervention, with literacy and math. Those are kind of the qualifiers. There sometimes is a way when you're doing school-wide to focus on behavior, but we're not, that's a model we don't use. We use targeted assistance. And that means we only target students who qualify based on the criteria we set for academic need. So it's not based on their free and reduced lunch rate, it's based on their academic need, and then they get a support from the interventionist until the need no longer is present, and then we add other students in. So that's the purpose of Title I. This year's allocation is listed there, $531,074. It is an increase of $3,877.81. Which is nice and unexpected. We have historically used, this reminds me of one thing I forgot to add, so I'm gonna add it in my notes. We've used Title I to fund the staffing necessary for the interventions. So that includes one literacy specialist who is housed at Riverview. 4 Ed Tech 3 positions that have specialized training in literacy interventions. So we have 1 at Pittston Randolph, 2 at LER, and 1 next year at Riverview because the numbers are so high. The caseload is too high for the 1 literacy specialist. And a proposed 5 Ed Tech 3 positions focused on math interventions, with 1 at Pittston, 2 at Laura E. Richards. I did this wrong. And currently 2 at Riverview. That's how it's set up. Again, high needs at Riverview. We're anticipating in the next year or 2, our needs at Riverview should actually be decreasing significantly, because I think we'll finally get caught up as we're moving students out of services, or they're moving on to the middle school for learning lab services. So it's salaries and benefits. The only thing I did not add here, which I want to make note of publicly, is that anytime a district receives more than $500,000 in Title I services, they are required to reserve 1% of that amount for family engagement funds. And so every Title I program is required to have family engagement activities or interactions. And those funds can be for like literacy and math nights, or author visits, or summer enrichment programming, or materials to support ongoing learning throughout the summer, materials to make games and activities for students to bring home and back and forth so that their families can learn how to practice the things the students are working on together. So that's a non-negotiable. So that will be added to this piece. So that's Title I. Do you have any questions about Title I, questions or concerns?
It sounds wonderful. And is it, a lot of them are they all, they're not all homeless, right?
No. That's just one tiny section of how you're going to use the funds. So we have, so the numbers vary based on our MTSS model. That's our tiered system of support, where students are identified for needing additional services outside the classroom. So first and foremost, all students receive core instruction in literacy and math, for the most part uninterrupted now. So they have that with their peers in their classroom with their teacher. Then some students receive extra, what we call tier 2 intervention. That's usually with a classroom teacher, sometimes with someone else skilled in that. And it's a little more intensive than the classroom, and it's targeted to a specific goal in hopes that with a little extra support, they'll be right there with their peers, right? They'll be able to access their grade level learning more easily. If over time, that's proving to not be effective, and the gap is growing between their peers and peers at grade level, and where they're showing proficiency, then they can go through a referral process to receive supplemental intervention support, which is our Title I program, literacy or math, sometimes both. We try to focus in one area or the other first. And then they'll see them during their intervention block. So while other students are receiving enrichment or intervention with their classroom teacher, or special ed services are having students work with them during the intervention block, then these students may be working with an interventionist during that same intervention block. So everyone's getting something that they need during the intervention block. And sometimes it's with a Title I person if they qualify, and that's considered our most intensive level of support. And they get it until their data, ongoing progress monitoring, until their data shows that they're making growth. So it's a more fluid system, so we don't have to say you're in it for a year. You're in it until you learn. And some of our students, especially our little ones, 6 weeks and they're moving on sometimes, and sometimes it's been years. And we're feeling like we're getting more efficient about helping students move. And some of our data is showing that. The caseload for each specialist is about 25 students. We're close to that in all of the positions except for in Riverview for the coming year, which is why I've proposed shifting some ed tech support there, because we're anticipating a need of around 37 students in literacy, 34 or 35 in math. And that's too high for one person. And if we can reduce the stress off one person by using these Title I dollars to afford the ed tech support, then we'll get more intensive support to the students in a more timely way, and hopefully make progress faster.
Is this intervention period daily?
Yes. Sometimes it's 4 days instead of 5, and if a student's doing really well and it looks like we can gradually release them, then they start doing 3 days and then eventually 2 days. So it's not a shock. And then there's a big celebration when they exit.
They have graduation.
Yeah, they have a little
My-
Title I graduation.
Yep, my kids I have one that went through math and 2 who did Title I literacy, and both processes were, I thought, very easy. Went well. My kids are great at all things now.
That's awesome. And that's the point. It's our goal is to really get in at the early grades. There's one school where for certain reasons, we were servicing more of the older students than the younger students. So then we just kept building this cycle of if you don't get the younger students, then it's always serving the older students. So we've been trying to provide a little more intensive support there so that in that K-5 building, we're all serving the older students, but we're starting to get into the younger students so that we can flip the model and have it all be right in the K2, mostly in the K2 space, so that they feel more confident and secure in those upper grades. It'll take a little while, but we'll get there.
I know that our big need in ed techs is in special ed, but are any of these lacking?
That's a great question. So,
Good question.
we've had a lot of consistent staffing in Title I. They get an extra half hour a day. They have a very focused role. It's either math interventionist or literacy interventionist. They get a lot of training. So they're not trying to do multiple jobs in a day. So sometimes there's an advantage to that. It's hard. There's a lot of data to manage, and we anticipate, we just actually had an opening for next year at Pittston that we just closed, and with the positions that I'm proposing for review, that will create an opening, but we usually are able to fill them pretty quickly. Now, at Laura E. Richards, because of our enrollment this past year, instead of filling the Title I position, we moved a kindergarten teacher into Title I for 1 year. And that was lovely. And now she'll move back into kindergarten, and so that position just got posted. So, I mean, we sometimes have an opening, but we usually are able to find someone either really skilled, because they've done the job somewhere else, or really interested in learning. And then our instructional coaches, either math or literacy, spend a lot of time with them on the instructional side. And then I spend time with the team on sort of the management side.
On the job training kind of thing.
It's a lot of on-the-job
Yeah,
training.
that's a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
Okay, so we're okay with Title I so far?
Yep.
Okay, so Title II, also from the federal government, dispersed through the Maine Department of Education. So the title or the category is teacher quality, professional development, and principal training. That's sort of what Title II stands for. Our allocation this coming year, the preliminary allocation, they always send out the finals later, and they don't usually change that much, is $119,375.79. That's an increase of $17,527.50, which was a pleasant surprise. We always, since I've been here at least, use a significant portion of those funds for a class size reduction teacher, which helps your budget. So it takes a teaching position from the local budget and uses it within the federal budget. And we've been doing it for so long, it hasn't been in the local budget for a really long time. So that would make a difference if we chose not to put it in the Title II budget. We change I didn't share who the teacher is, but I did share the salary so you have a sense. We change who the teacher is because we do it based on what the data suggests the need would be. So it's not just like we're plucking in a teacher and saying you're the for them, there's no difference. To the staff, they're still getting paid, they're still in a bargaining agreement, all that. For us, it matters because there's a whole report that goes with how you justify it, right? So the way we justify it is we say, well, where is the need, right? So where's the enrollment and where's the academic data? And what would suggest would need a little bit smaller class size and to remain within policy at least. And so, for example, we know that the incoming kindergarten class has a significant, the highest number of students coming with services than we've ever seen through CDS. That may work out just fine, but we're not entirely sure. And so it's in our best interest to be proactive, reduce the class size at that building. So of the 4 positions proposed for kindergarten, one of them is actually paid for out of this budget. And so that will reduce the class sizes from instead of 18 to 20 students that would be projected with 3 kindergarten teachers, which is kind of high for kindergarten, to 13 to 15 students next year, which is a much more reasonable and within class size policy, but just a little bit on the lower end, given the need that class. So other years, it's been other grades or other buildings. So that takes up $83,000 plus some change there, of the allotted Title II funds. So then we usually use the rest of the Title II funds for professional development purposes, because that's what it's for. And that's the part that changes depending on what our needs are. So like this year, we used funds for civil discourse training at the middle school and high school for staff, and book training plus a book study, for professional learning group training at the middle school around their MTSS system. So really making sure they understand their tiers and how to develop an intervention system that isn't at the learning lab level. Some administrative coaching. So our assistant principals have a coach that works with them on their leadership skills as a team. And $10,000 in mentor training, which we use every other year to ensure we have a large cohort of mentors who can support new teachers to our district. And they're trained in June every other year. And we use money from this fund for that. And then some of our professional learning for our instructional coaches, so that doesn't impact the local budget. So this coming year, the proposal at the moment is training, a deeper dive into professional learning groups. Instead of just middle school, high school, but also we're really getting down into the instructional level now. Instead of the data level, we're getting into the instructional planning level. So that's kind of exciting. Leadership coaching for a couple of our new administrators, building leaders. Which our building leaders meet with me routinely and then meet with Pat every month. But there's something to be said about having someone who's really skillful at thinking through the role of being a building leader, who's not your evaluator in any way. So that's what that purpose is for. Again, professional learning for instructional coaches. This is under the assumption that there might be some miraculous way to get a fifth math,
I
a
just
fifth coach, which
started.
would be math.
I was like, oh.
But I haven't really figured out a way.
I know.
So if that doesn't happen, I would shift some of the dollars into one of these needs that might need it more. But it would be 4 coaches. And that includes like everything, in case there's some travel associated with there. So that we wouldn't be paying for that out of our district. I try to reduce the costs other than the salaries for instructional coaches out of the local budget. Supplies for the professional training and texts that we offer. And then again, there's a bullet in there. If there was any money I could contribute to create a pool for a 5th math coach, I would do that. Andrea and I'm kind of talking about it, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to pull that off. You know, I totally respect and understand why we couldn't fund it out of the local budget. But if we had other areas that I could access grant funds, mostly for 1 year, I was going to try. And then, but you can see I have a backup plan. Our high school really needs some significant work in their MTSS system, defining it, refining some current practices, putting some of the practices they have into the model so that they understand how that plays out. And that's going to take some professional learning time, some collaborative time, some sub-pay time to release some people from the building for some of that work. And I think a little bit of external expertise, a little PD support. So I would just redirect the funds to that right now, which they aren't allocated for at the moment. So questions, comments, concerns? That's Title II.
You're crafty, I give you credit. That's good.
Yes, it's good.
I really like that you use some of the money to fund a position to lower the teacher-student ratio, because I think there's evidence that says the lower the class size, it may be one of the best bangs for your buck, and I'm glad that that was done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a commitment from the district, right, to use grant funding for that. So they've been pretty, as this committee and the board's been pretty good about supporting that. We haven't had any public comments saying otherwise, and it does help your local budget too. But it also
Nice.
allows us to do that very thing, right? Which is why often it is at the lower grades. 1 year it was in a 5th grade classroom though, because the data just suggested that that's where we needed to lower the class size that year. Yeah. Okay, feel free to come back to any of these if you have questions. And then Title IV is fun. Title IV has the most rules, and it has certain categories that you can use it in, student support and academic enrichment, but it turns into 4 distinct categories. And when you start accessing some of the categories, you're actually required to access more of the categories. So then your funds have to be dispersed equally, or not necessarily equally, but across multiple categories. So it starts to become a little bit of a complicated web. We have the right and the authority to transfer Title IV into other titles. If you transfer anything into Title I, you can't transfer it out. So we only transfer in if we need it in Title I. But Title IV, so our allocation is $53,851.28. It is an increase of $5,781.35. As you can see in the notes, we typically transfer the funds into Title II and Title V. By transferring most of the funds into Title V, it helps us, which is a fairly small title, but also the most flexible title, pay for the math intervention position at Helen Thompson,
Mm.
which is our non-Title I school. So we can still get one of the intervention positions paid for out of grants instead of local budget.
Mhm.
So I have a proposal to transfer $47,000 out of Title IV into Title V. And the remaining 6,600 out of Title IV into Title II, which is already accounted for in the breakdown above.
Yep.
Any questions about that? Okay, Title V, the last one. Rural Education Initiative. We still qualify. We might not qualify in a few years. Some of the data that they're using is suggesting that we may eventually, this may sunset for our region. I don't know enough yet to understand how and why, but I will eventually, and I'll share it with you. For now, we have a pretty small allocation.
Mm.
The wonderful thing about having Title V is because it's the most flexible funding stream. If you have any dollars in Title V, you can then use it and transfer money into it, right? So that's why we transfer 4 into 5, because
Makes
it's the
sense.
most flexible, and then we use it on a staffing position, which then reduces the local budget, still allows us to meet the comparable federal requirements for Title I. It's a win-win. So hopefully we keep getting it for a little longer. We did have a decrease in Title V, which is not surprising knowing that we might lose this grant over time. So it decreased $2,992. We now have $11,976.25. I could transfer in, I haven't done it yet, $47,197. And that, all of that combined would cover salary and benefits for one Ed Tech 3 position, who's a little higher up on the steps.
So you said you don't know how we qualify, and I'm gonna ask, do you have any ideas at the distance they travel to get to school? Is it?
No, there's 2 qualifying factors at the federal government. One, we absolutely don't qualify for. None of our 4 communities qualify for it. And then the other is the one we qualify for, which is the one that might be sunsetting. So what I can do is follow up with the names, because one is like REAP, REAP, and one is HL something or other, and there's rules behind them, and then they use that, and we get a fancy spreadsheet that says, based on the
Oh.
data in the federal data in your region, probably from the census,
Mhm.
and based on the rules of these funding streams, this is how much you can qualify for. We used to qualify for both. Now we only qualify for one of the 2 that line up with Title V.
Population density have anything to do with it?
Yeah, because rural, it is about the population density, for sure. I think it's also about, some sort of family income is
Mhm.
another piece. The median income probably is another piece. I don't know what the other factors are.
Yeah.
But I can find out. That we have a really great Title V contact person at the state, Dan Weeks. He's been doing this for a really long time. And when it's not the height of, reporting season, I might check in with him and see if I can get more information.
Great.
So that's what we reserve those funds for. Is that okay and comfortable with you?
Mhm.
Okay. So that's our title funds. So I will make the one adjustment to the family engagement reservation in Title I, and then I will make sure Terry has the updated document and we'll post it to our website. You'll find it under, it's under central office.
Okay, yeah.
ESEA, and you
Yeah.
click on that and you'll see it, and I'll also send the link out when I send it through email.
It's there.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Mhm.
Oops, I don't wanna close that. Okay. Next. Let me scroll. This is the new addition to our agenda.
Yep.
We have enough people here to, we will need a vote
Okay.
as a recommendation if you want to
To the
do this,
board,
to the
yep.
board.
Got it.
Okay?
Mhm.
Because you've already approved your program of studies. So, we already have a class called Career in Tech. It's a semester-based class. It's a required course for all of our students. There's some exceptions. They can supplant it with a JMG course. I feel like there's one other option, but I don't remember. But they all meet the same criteria, the same type of criteria. We've just learned that we have an opportunity to have the course meet the graduation requirement, which is a half credit, so it's only a semester-based course. And any student enrolled in any of the sections next year could opt into earning 2 college credits with the University of Maine through their early college program. INT 193 is what it's called. Intro to Career Exploration and Development. And so if they complete their semester-based course at Gardner Area High School in Career and Tech and opt in at the same time to the 2 college credits, complete the schoolwork associated with the 2 college credits, so there's a little bit of extra schoolwork and it's outlined in the syllabus, and pass, then they'll earn the required graduation half credit, and they'll earn 2 credits. They'll earn a notation on their transcript that they've earned 2 credits to the University of Maine for INT 193, which could transfer if they end up going to a university that supports that course.
Yep.
This didn't come to you earlier because we weren't clear that it felt like we had to adjust the course significantly. And then a review was done on our course and found out that we actually do more in our semester-based course than the university requires. They just required a few different assignments. So the students are getting more than their university course anyway, but the assignments are now lined up. Additionally, we thought we had to have like some sections. So like, period 1 and period 3 or something would be the university level course and other sections would be the other course. And kids would have to have their schedule fit it. And we learned, no, we can actually run the course as is. Anyone who can fit the course in whenever it's being taught fits it in. And while in the course, at the beginning of the course, they can say they want it for both purposes or they just want it for their high school graduation requirement. And both are okay. So to me, that's much more equitable and it's more manageable scheduling wise, and it doesn't affect staffing at all.
Yeah.
The instructor's already been approved by the University of Maine to be an instructor with them. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't gonna hit roadblocks before we even tried to put this forward. And then the only other addendum to the syllabus, besides a few notations of some additional work, like students in the course, it's called EC students, they actually have to conduct a job shadow or a career interview, which they don't have to do for the graduation requirement, but they would have to do for the course. It's a lovely addition. It doesn't seem like it would be that challenging, especially if the instructor can support the student. And then I think there's one, and there's a report from that they'll have to produce. I actually think that's the only extra thing.
There's one at the bottom of that same page, that one.
Oh, yes, and then a college financial aid
That's amazing.
component.
Yeah.
Which of course makes sense for a
Yeah,
university
totally.
course.
Mhm.
All of the content is supported by the University of Maine. And then the only other adjustment to the syllabus is on the final couple pages where, oops, I should be scrolling. Course. Outcomes, the outcomes are all the same except for a few areas. This was all attached to the revised agenda that was sent out yesterday and can certainly be made available if this is approved. Assessments, late work. These final pages here, these are requirements for any course that's being offered by kind of via the university at a high school or any school. Academic honesty statements, accessibility services, which we actually added a line after printing this that says within MSAD11, these are also the services that are available to you. So that it was super clear, because this only talks about like the university ones,
Right.
which might feel inaccessible. And so we added specifically where in MSAD11 you get services. And then just all their legal
Yeah.
stuff that they need on their syllabi. And that's it. What kinds of questions do you have?
This looks great.
Yeah.
It's very good. I always think, you know, when we go, like we'll do next week to sit and people vote on the articles and everything. There's usually one called careers and then there's no money allocated or something and
Oh, the
people
tech
say,
center has no money allocated because
Right.
the state directs all funds directly there, so we don't have to pay for it, but we need to put it as a line.
right, and I understand that, but wouldn't this cost something, you know, for, I mean, that's part of careers. Why is
Right, but it's part of regular general instruction and part of our
Oh.
diploma pathways
Okay,
process, so you don't have to put it under that category, it's under regular instruction.
and Orono, I know very little about technology, I'm sure you do. But it's, I have a friend whose son went to, he graduated from Kent's Hill and he was a very bright young man and he went out to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and that's where I grew up. I know how long it takes to drive out there, it's
Mhm.
10 hours. And he liked it okay, but Orono contacted him and said, what are you doing going out there? And so they gave him a free ride
Wow,
up there, and apparently their program allows you to, they train you for different avenues off of it, so that you really can do an awful lot with it, and
Yep.
I'm proud of that. I'm more loyal to Maine than New York State.
But this adds to what we already do
Yeah,
for
and-
some of these, yeah,
and it's not an additional cost to the students.
right,
Uh-huh.
It's part of the early college programming, so they do not have to pay for those credits.
yeah,
I would think most of them should take.
What's not to like?
yeah.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Okay, so
Okay, next
do
year.
you wanna?
Would we like to vote? All those in favor?
Yes.
So the first, what's the motion?
The motion is to approve the
Recommend.
recommend to the board the career and tech 2 college credits, INT 193 as written. All in favor?
Yes, second, all in favor,
Uh,
whatever we have to do.
yeah,
Done.
Thank you. Approved. To move on the
Yes.
agenda, thank you.
And then, who was the second?
Megan, yeah.
Okay, we are ready.
Look at
Cruising
us.
right
Wow.
along.
We
So I
are.
can stop sharing now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yesterday, we had the opportunity to have Brandon Seho come to the district. He flew in from Cincinnati, Ohio. And speak to our middle school students and our high school students. His presentation is called The Mental Game, and it's really to reduce the stigma of receiving and securing mental health support or therapy when working through difficult situations. And he did have a slightly different message for the middle school than the high school. The high school was a little more raw, and the middle school was a little more tempered because of the ages. But he was a famous journalist, well, famous in his area. He was reaching the goals he had set to be this like well-known journalist, sports journalist in his region, and cover some of the big sports in the Cincinnati area. And he had all kinds of like videos and photos and all, it was very cool. And at the same time, he then discussed what happened to him in high school, and a photo was shared of him after a football game, and the alienation he felt from this like embarrassing photo that was shared, and the spiral he went into around depression and his mental health, and he actually did discuss some suicidal thoughts, and then how he like managed that, not so well, but managed it through his adult life. And so he was able to meet all these great professional goals he had, but he was like struggling, his relationship was falling apart, all these things. And eventually he sort of, as he said, hit rock bottom, and he ended up seeking out support from his parents, and there's a whole story behind that. And then he actually went to a clinical facility and received a lot of intensive therapy, and talked about it as like it's a classroom experience. It's not like a psychiatric ward that you might be worried about, but it's more like you're getting therapy, but you're also learning strategies and skills to cope with all kinds of other students in classrooms. And to reduce the stigma, he really wanted to make that clear. And then what are some strategies people can use, and shared his winning strategies that he's learned, and and helped them relate with others, and then did some exercises with the kids to get them to recognize that lots of people have moments when they're struggling or feeling alone, and what are some things you can do to help each other out. So we also talked about like healthy coping mechanisms versus unhealthy. And so I think it was pretty well received. I mean, we had 45 minutes at the high school with the whole high school, and then we had 24 students for an hour after that in a student leadership session just with him, well, and other adults. And then he came back and met with the whole middle school for about 45 minutes, a little more than 45 minutes at the end of the day. And we have a student here who is part of the student leadership session. Do you want to share anything?
Sure. So after the assembly yesterday, we went to the library and it was a lot of like students that are involved in other school activities. Like I know like a bunch of them are on the Interact club and on like the board, and some of them are on like NHS and stuff like that. And we broke out into like different groups, and he asked us 4 questions that we answered in our small groups, which are like randomly selected. And the questions were like, what do you wish that parents or adults and teachers understood more about kids today, and what you want the community to do to help, and then what you think people are doing right and wrong. And so it was like random groups. Like in my group, it was 5 people in each group, like ish. And it was like me, another freshman, and then 3 seniors. And we were just kind of like forced to work together, even though I didn't really know any of them.
Just like life.
Yeah. So it was like awkward at first, but everyone had really good answers. And I think they're in the library still, like our answers to the questions. And it wasn't really like a learning, it was like a discussion, and it was really fun.
So the principal did type up all the responses and she did share them with me.
Oh, nice.
And I've scanned them, but I didn't have enough time to then turn them into something that I could say like,
Oh,
here's
here
the
it is.
official
Yeah.
outcome in a way that was,
Yep.
collective and cohesive. So we can do that. It was great to have the 21st students in that session. That we were never really sure, because first you email students and not everyone checks their email.
Right.
But it was a pretty, like you said, it was a pretty good range. Some athletes who are student leaders and academic and performing arts, and it's just lots of community oriented students. I think that's really exciting. And he seemed pretty like sociable, and some kids wanted his shirt. He has a therapy is cool shirt, and they
Yeah,
were trying
I
to
saw that,
get a action on that. But so I want to thank Patricia Buck-Welton from Healthy Communities of the Capital Area.
Mm.
She helped fund the presentation,
Right.
and Brandon and his manager EJ actually gave us a 2-for-1 deal. So they allowed 2 major presentations for one cost. As I talked to him about like our area and our costs, and so it started because I heard he went to Yarmouth.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, well, if Yarmouth students have this opportunity, Gardner students should, or MSAD11 students should have this opportunity. But I didn't know about it in time to get him to just drive up the road when he was in Yarmouth. He was doing 30 schools in 30 states in 30 days or
Oh,
something
wow.
like that, something crazy like that. 30 schools in 30 states, and maybe it was a little more than 30 days, but not much.
That's a lot, though.
And so I really wanted our students to, like, if they get to have access to that, we should have access to that. So we negotiated, and he was really, really generous with us to create that condition.
awesome.
So some of our United Way funds are helping pay for the travel, and because it's focused on mental
Yeah.
health, and Healthy Communities of the Capital Area was able to access some grant funds to pay for the presentation. And he moves to LA in like 4 days. So it was like, we snagged him before he's off in the world. He generates a podcast called The Mental Game.
That's right.
And he interviews like famous musicians, actors, artists, all this about their mental health. So like he got invited to, I can't remember who it was, but he was like at his concert
He met
behind the
like,
scenes or something.
he's met like Terry Crews and like Kevin Gates and a girl, like a bunch of famous like athletes, and Kate Flanders.
Yeah, from
She
The
was on The
Office.
Office.
Oh, yeah.
Serena
Yeah.
Williams.
Yeah, and like it was really cool to hear about. Like, and
Yeah.
there was like a video that he played, and it was like clips of them from like movies and shows, and then them being like, that was actually like my lowest point. So it's cool to see like the comparison. It was really fun.
Yeah, that what you put out in front of people isn't always what's actually going on
Mhm.
behind the scenes. And that all these famous people are also struggling this and have to learn, like one of them was talking about his mental toughness, he had to develop that, it's not just something you have. And another about it's important to be vulnerable and open, to kind of learn to manage your feelings and emotions. And so he has this podcast, he's done 50 sessions, with 50 different famous people. And sometimes it's the first time any reporter has ever asked them about their mental health.
Right.
And they're willing to spend an hour with him to talk, or 45 minutes or something, talk. Like one, he went to this concert, he went backstage, and before the guy went up to perform, they recorded a session. I was like, that's so wild. So I think he quit his job when he had this, like, his life kind of fall apart. And then he decided he wanted to do something really purposeful. And so he's like launching this career, and anyway, so I think it was pretty good.
Yeah, and like when we first got to like the library, we played like a game. So it was like we had to line up by our birthdays, but we couldn't talk. And so he kind of used that as like a segue to like, how do you think this relates to mental health? And it's like you can't talk about like what it is. Or like I said, like not everyone knows your birthday and not everyone knows like your mental health. So it was just like team building exercises, and it was really fun.
That's cool.
And it was nice to see, like, with the questions that were being answered, there was, like, administration there, like, Miss Arnold was there, to see that, like, they want stuff to be done and that our answers are actually being, like, taken into account by people.
They are, and I mean, my first glance was like, there are some things we're doing well, and then there's some opportunities for improvement. And from the student's perspective, it's real. It was kind of nice to see some of the things they recognized were happening that, you don't always know if it's being recognized. And then it was good to see also the feedback, because like for me, we might have access to another round of United Way funding that I wasn't sure we would. And if we did, we can use this direct data to help write the proposal for what we'd want to do next. You know what I mean? So there's some opportunities that we could potentially draw from. That's exciting.
What's this guy's name again?
Brandon, like Brandon, Saho, Saho. If you Google him, you'll see him all over the place.
Yeah, and this
Yeah.
mental game you can get on Instagram, or there, like she said, the podcast or whatever, you can find it and follow him. He was giving away the t-shirts yesterday, you had to tag someone, so I tagged her. Cause I was like, oh, who knows, you never know. Well, who doesn't want a t-shirt? How did the middle school receive it? Did you?
I thought I stayed through the middle school
Yeah.
session too. We didn't do a student leadership session
Right.
with them for their age, but their questions were a little quirkier sometimes.
Yeah.
But cause they were really enamored by the famous
Like a
people.
famous person,
But
yeah,
his message was really strong, and there was a lot of attention.
good.
And there were some really thoughtful questions that he was able to answer,
Nice.
which was really nice. And he moved around a lot, and he had them move around, and it was the end of the day, so I was a little nervous because it was
Right.
like getting nice around. It's the end of the day, and
Yeah,
but I thought they were really respectful and did a nice job.
that's great.
Well,
Yeah.
that sounds great. And you're gonna give us some of the questions they asked, or you're scanning
reflections.
something?
Yeah, I have some data that's been collected, qualitative data, and so I just feel like I need to organize it a little bit. It was organized by how the students responded, but then I sort of need to kind of put it together a little bit for an audience, but yeah, I'll follow up.
Be good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so too.
Awesome,
And that's all I have.
awesome. We
Wow.
may be adjourned. It is 4:20. Look at us.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria.